In the heart of the galaxy, the war had raged for centuries. An unyielding conflict between the vast, technologically advanced alien forces of the Varka and the scattered human colonies spread across the stars. The humans, despite their ingenuity and relentless determination, were never truly a match for the overwhelming might of their galactic adversaries. But that was about to change. Elizabeth Devereux, a highly ranked officer in the Varka military, stood before the grand warship, her posture rigid, her mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. She had been chosen to marry a human warrior of their race, someone the Varka considered a curiosity. The decision was not made out of love or desire, but for duty. The Varka needed a human to integrate into their ranks, a symbol of their unity with the humans, to stoke fear in their enemies. Elizabeth was tasked with making the human a figure of power. She would groom him into something more than just a soldier, into a hero. Or so she thought. Her gaze fell upon Evan, the human she was to marry. He stood at the edge of the ship's docking bay, wearing simple combat armor. He was everything the Varka expected from a human, tall, muscular, his brown hair a mess of untamed curls. He looked out of place among the alien officers, his stance humble but filled with quiet confidence. He was not the battle-hardened monster the Varka had imagined when Elizabeth had first met him. She had doubted his potential. Humans were known for their stubbornness, but they were also unpredictable. She had expected him to be another cog in the machine, another pawn in the war. She had thought she could mold him into a weapon of the Varka, but what Elizabeth had failed to understand was the indomitable spirit of humanity. Their wedding had been a ceremonial affair, full of pomp and grandeur, with no true love behind it. She had stood beside him, her hand clasped in his, as the officiant pronounced them partners. The Varka had watched with cold eyes, expecting nothing more than the fulfillment of a military contract. They thought nothing of the bond that might form between the two of them. But as the days went on, Elizabeth began to see something in Evan that she hadn't anticipated. Something more than a soldier. Evan's ability to adapt, to learn, to push the boundaries of his limitations, was unlike anything Elizabeth had ever witnessed. Where the Varka saw humans as weak, she saw something entirely different, raw potential. He was relentless, refusing to back down. No matter how insurmountable the odds seemed at first, Elizabeth had put him through the standard military training, testing his endurance and combat prowess. He had failed the first few trials miserably, yet he never showed frustration. He simply worked harder. Where other soldiers would have given up, Evan pressed on. He learned, adapted, and with each passing day, he grew stronger both in body and mind. It wasn't long before the Varka commanders took notice. Evan was sent on increasingly dangerous missions, ones designed to break him, to prove that a human could never rise to the level of the Varka warriors. Yet, time and time again, he proved them wrong. The humans might not have had the technology or the advantage of their alien counterparts, but they had an innate survival instinct, an unyielding desire to fight. And it was this instinct that Evan harnessed. Months passed, and the war intensified. Evan's name began to echo through the galaxy, not as the human consort of Elizabeth Devereux, but as a legend in the making. His victories were nothing short of miraculous. He led skirmishes with brutal efficiency, taken down Varka elite forces with tactical brilliance that even the alien generals couldn't predict. At first, Elizabeth had been content to watch him rise as a figurehead, the perfect tool for the Varka-esque propaganda machine. But as Evan's victories accumulated, something shifted within her. She began to see him not as a weapon, but as a man, someone capable of great power and even greater sacrifice. One fateful day, as the war reached a tipping point, the Varka decided to test Evan's loyalty. They assigned him to lead a mission deep behind enemy lines, one that was sure to be a suicide mission. If he succeeded, he would be hailed as a hero. If he failed, it would be the end of the human experiment. Evan, with his characteristic determination, accepted the mission without hesitation. He knew the stakes, and he knew that he might never return. As he boarded the shuttle to the enemy territory, Elizabeth watched him leave with a sense of dread she couldn't explain. This mission felt different. This was not just another battle. This was Evan's defining moment. The days that followed were agonizing. The communication lines were silent. Then, one evening, word came through. Evan had completed the mission against all odds. Not only had he infiltrated the enemy stronghold, but he had taken down their entire command center, crippled their war effort, and returned with invaluable intelligence that would shift the tides of the war. The Varka were stunned. They could no longer deny that Evan had transcended the expectations of every alien race. He had become something more than just a soldier. He was a force of nature, but it wasn't until the battle for the Varka capital that Elizabeth saw him rise as something truly extraordinary. During the final assault, as the warships clashed in the skies above the planet, Evan stood at the forefront leading the charge. The enemy forces underestimated him, believing he was just another warrior to be slaughtered. But Evan was not just a man. He was a battle deity, a force of will and strength that seemed to defy the laws of nature. He tore through the enemy ranks like a storm, his movements a blur of lethal precision. Elizabeth watched in awe as Evan fought, his strength unmatched, his tactics beyond even the most seasoned commanders. In that moment, Elizabeth understood. She had married him for duty, but she had grown to love him for the man he was, a man who had turned the tide of an entire war. When the final battle was over and the war was won, the galaxy knew Evan's name. He had become a symbol of hope, a living legend. And as he returned to Elizabeth, his eyes filled with the fire of victory, she knew that humanity had not only survived, they had conquered. And with him, Elizabeth would stand, not as a soldier in service to her people, but as the partner of a god. The human who had once been a mere tool for the Varka-S propaganda had risen to become the most powerful force in the galaxy. And Elizabeth Devereux, who had married him for duty, now stood by his side as his equal. Together, they would shape the future of the stars,